Well, okay then. Wow. So the Starfield Direct just aired after the Xbox showcase, and I'm just gonna go ahead and speak for all of us and say that this was what we wanted to see from Todd and the team since the very beginning. The Starfield Direct really covered everything that I've been asking for, that other people have been asking for, and more, and to say that a lot of us have been blown away is really an understatement here. That said, as much as there are so many things that I'm super excited about when it comes to Starfield, there are still things that I'm a little bit concerned about. And I'm gonna talk about those things as well later on, so make sure you stick around. But hey, let's just go through the really good things in no particular order, shall we? First of all, the visual presentation is just phenomenal here. I mean, we're all hoping for it to look good, but it really does look like a next-gen game, at least when it comes to the environments. Speaking of which, the fact that the game uses light simulation depending on the atmosphere and distance of the planets from its star is just insane to me and speaks volumes of the detail the artists and graphical designers have put into Starfield. Shown later, we also see how much detail the team has put into just in-game objects such as food items in your inventory. I mean, it looks delicious, right? Look at those crispy looking trilobites and with whipped cream even. Yummy. I do wonder if there are animations for eating too. That would be great. I was also pretty surprised at the amount of detail that's been put into the various aspects of your ship, like the different crew members you can recruit. And according to the presentation, you can find new potential crewmates aside from the Constellation team you'll be introduced to at the start of the game. This is also one of those things that I was personally very curious about. And it seems like you'll have to go to a spaceport to recruit other members or have a chanced encounter in order to find them. And every crewmate also have their particular own set of skills that is useful to you. And that's really cool as well. Oh, and of course, romance confirmed.
We're bang, okay?
With humans anyway. Shipbuilding and customization just looks like silly fun. The fact that you can place every model in basically any way you want, sort of like Legos, sounds incredibly enjoyable. And of course, yes, just like a lot of you guys, I will try my hand at building the Normandy. I mean, come on. Now, one thing that I was pretty concerned about before has been the ship combat, and while the showcase didn't exactly blow me away at this part in particular, at least now we know that we have ship VATs, as you can manually target different vulnerable parts on enemy ships, which is just really cool. Also, boarding all enemy ships is now confirmed. So if you want to be a true pirate, you can just take other ships and add them to your fleet, or as far as I can understand it, sell the ship for some good money. Now, while we're on the topic of base building, the details about outposts also sounds really good so far, with you being able to build your base from a top-down perspective, sort of like The Sims or SimCity in a way. And this is obviously going to allow you to get a greater perspective for the layout of your base. And again, your crew will come in handy here if you just want to increase productivity on your base. Character creation is also a pretty big one, with a layout that's simplistic but with an advanced function, and I'm assuming that it's going to be possible to create at least a similar version of yourself here, which would do wonders for the role-playing aspect. The skill tree also looks really fun, and it seems to be really deep as well, with there being 5 different skill trees with many different perks in them, all of which you can apparently rank up 4 times, so there's already some deep progression here. Also, the alien mind control perk is going to be really cool to use. Imagine how useful this could be in combat, especially if you find some massive and dangerous creature like here. I also particularly like the idea of making a one-punch man build. I mean, that shit is just going to be so much fun. Especially since the melee combat seems fairly well animated for once. Which is a surprise, I mean, it's a Bethesda game. At the end of the showcase, we also see what looks like literal force powers on display here, which I'm assuming is a skill you'll unlock probably the further you progress in the main story. Now, I'm a huge sucker for exploration if it's done well, and it seems like Bethesda has focused a lot on making this one of the bigger activities in Starfield, and I mean, that really comes to no one's surprise, I guess, since the game is literally Skyrim in space, according to Todd Howard himself. But one of the bigger worries that people have brought forward is the 1,000 planets thing, as it just seems virtually impossible to make 1,000 planets interesting to explore since the planets themselves will be procedurally generated. And in the showcase, I think it's pretty apparent that Bethesda is trying to allay those fears by showing us that yes, the planets have been procedurally generated, but activities and bases on said planets are all handcrafted. It does seem, however, that the locations for these bases and activities are also procedural. So even if you visit the same planet as your friend, it's gonna look different. Then again, most of this is optional, and if you just want to harvest resources and keep doing handcrafted side missions or the main story, you could just do that. And speaking of the main story, we all know at this point that we're hunting for alien artifacts, and yes, it does seem like the endgame is about us finding intelligent alien life. Now let's just hope that this isn't one of those, oh, it was future humans all along, twists, because I'm so sick of those. In any case, the big main hubs like New Atlantis and Neon looks really interesting, and I like that Neon especially resembles a mix of Omega from Mass Effect and Night City. And of course, if I know myself right, I'll be spending a lot of time there because of, well, reasons. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about my personal concerns here, and that of the general consensus here on the interwebs. First of all, the game has now been officially confirmed by IGN to be locked at 30 FPS on all resolutions, including regular old 1080p. Yeah. Now, some of you might not think that this is a big issue, and if that's acceptable to you, then well, I'm glad you feel that way. However, since, modders are inevitably gonna remove this FPS cap on PC, I can't imagine this being a very good sales pitch for Xbox. Hence, I'm sure it's the reason why they didn't talk about it in the showcase. Now, they're obviously locking Starfield at 30 FPS for stability purposes, and knowing the creation engine, allowing 60 FPS or more on console is gonna cause all kinds of issues, like in Fallout 4, where uncapping FPS literally puts your game into turbo mode. Again, as I'll be playing on PC, this really isn't much of a deal breaker for me, but it is indeed a real concern, especially because of how huge Starfield will be. I mean, if the team can't make sure Starfield runs at 30 FPS at all times, then the experience is gonna be real horrible. Because imagine spiking down to 10 to 15 FPS in heavy firefights. Yikes. Now again, hopefully Bethesda will be able to guarantee a stable 30 FPS at all times, in which case that would probably be acceptable to most people, at least on Xbox. Now, speaking of firefights, I have to mention that despite the various guns and weapons looking really cool, I still find the combat somewhat floaty looking. Now don't get me wrong, it definitely looks better compared to previous showcases, but there's just something about it that's just not juicy enough. It could simply be that the different gravity levels affect the punchiness of the combat itself, in which case, hey, I'm all for it. And hey, maybe it's the YouTube compression that's making it both look and sound pretty stale. In any case, it's something that you'll be doing a lot in the game, so here's hoping it's much better when you actually play it for yourself. Oh, and we've seen blood and blood spatter, but still no gore, which is a little disappointing considering it's a Bethesda game after all. Alright, so about the facial animations. I've seen quite a few people bring this up already, and yes, some of the NPCs do indeed seem to be affected by the tired face syndrome. But there also seems to be a few occasions where the facial performance looks really good, like at the start of your journey, which they showed here. Again, this is a Bethesda game, so I'm absolutely expecting there to be some really stale-looking NPCs. And there's really no way around it, especially since a lot of the NPCs will definitely be procedurally generated. Now, the 1000 planets to explore. Yes, this is actually still somewhat of a concern for a lot of people, including me. And I still think that it's going to be virtually impossible to make a lot of the exploration very exciting, simply because, yes, while there will be handcrafted content to enjoy, it's still going to be procedurally placed around the procedurally generated planets. AKA, this is where a lot of the No Man's Sky comparisons come in, because Hello Games essentially did the same thing there when it comes to handcrafted content such as bases and alien ruins. And if you've played No Man's Sky, then you know that this stuff gets boring really quickly. And the only way to really alleviate this is to have so much content made by hand that it's going to be virtually impossible to find the same assets twice. Of course, there's just no way of avoiding repetition altogether, and there's definitely going to be times where you're thinking, oh wait, I've done this outpost 4 times already, but on different planets. Question though is if it's going to be a big deal for you, or not. It is for me, and I'll most likely just proceed with the main story at that point when I start to feel the repetition. All in all, I don't want this video to end up on a pessimistic side, because I am, in all honesty, super excited for Starfield. Especially after this showcase, because it actually proved that at least Starfield isn't going to be an example of wide as an ocean, deep as a puddle, because there's obviously some deep gameplay aspects here. And since I'm playing this on PC, some of the previously mentioned issues will be less of a problem for me, since, well, the mods for this are just gonna be literally insane. Speaking of which, I will probably have to get a new PC in preparation for Starfield, so if you haven't already, then remember to subscribe, or better yet, become a member to support the channel. So I might be able to upgrade before Starfield arrives. In any case, do let me know what you thought of this showcase in the comments below. And as always, have a great day. MrHulthen, signing out.